Hello everybody, and welcome to another update video, I should say. And today we're going to be discussing the planned battle rating changes for February 2017. This was literally put up only a few hours ago, and we knew that this was going to be coming as of about, I think it was Tuesday. There was a live stream between the Russian live streamer Alkanafter and a Q&A session with BVV, the Russian tank director over at Gaijin, and he said in that interview that there was going to be a massive battle rating patch coming up next week. So these are the planned changes, or these can still be adjusted. However, this is most likely what we're going to see coming next week. As you can see in the bottom right-hand corner there, this is being recorded on the 10th of February 2017. So if you are watching this way down the line in the future, then, well, this probably isn't going to apply to you. In any case, I'm just going to skip over most of the aircraft, although most of the Spitfires are getting their battle ratings massively adjusted across the board for the most part. I mean, 6.0, 6.3, 6.3, 6.7, 5.3, 5.7. And from what I've heard, the Spitfires were performing a little bit better than they really should have been at their battle rating. So, from what I can tell, this seems to be a decent change. Let's see, what else here? Douglas, that's only being changed for arcades, so that doesn't really matter. But anyways, let's get to the ground vehicles. This is what the actual focus of the video is going to be on, and how this is going to possibly change the meta of upcoming ground forces. So let's get right into it. Alright, so the vehicles that I want to look over are, let's see here, T-3485s, their battle ratings are being adjusted, and I would say this is a good thing. The T-3485 for its battle rating was probably the best medium tank in the game, and now that it's a 5.7, it's going to be on the same tier as Panthers and Tigers, which I personally believe is probably the right place for it, to be honest. T-3457, almost nobody plays this tank, so that's not too surprising that its battle rating is being dropped. The 3457 Mod 43, that's also a premium, that's also being dropped a little bit. The ASU-85 is having its battle rating adjusted from 6.7 to 6.3, that is actually a pretty good change. Although, whether or not it's actually going to be useful, it remains to be seen. And I'll get into why here in a moment. The KV-1 Zis 5, that's being dropped to 4.3. That should have some implications for lower tiers. However, with the powerful anti-tank guns that are roaming around at that tier now, mainly the Flak 37, it shouldn't be that big of an issue. KV-1E has been dropped to 4.0, which should be very good for that vehicle, seeing as the amount of armor it's got. You have to excuse me if I mute myself for a second there while I cough my lungs out. I got a lot of foam in my throat today, so just one of those times a year. Anyway, KV-85 being dropped to 5.0. That's a good change. And then here comes some of the first big changes. The IS-2 and the IS-2 Mod 44 are getting massive battle rating decreases. 6.0 to 5.7 across the board for the regular IS-2, which is an excellent change, because the IS-2 really struggled at 6.0. I mean, it could work, but it wasn't great. And it really, really struggled. So the fact that this thing is now on the same battle rating as the Tigers, I think is a good change. And it's certainly going to help the Russians a lot in that department. Also, the IS-1 is being dropped to 5.3, and I wholeheartedly agree with this change, because the IS-1, in my opinion, was one of the worst tanks in the game. It still is one of the worst vehicles in the game, but it's actually going to be a lot better now. That it'll probably be average at this point, because you've still got that 85mm gun, but you've actually got, funnily enough, you've got pretty much the exact same performance as the T-3485 here, but you're at a lower battle rating with more armor. So that's actually not a bad change. The IS-2 Mod 1944 has also been dropped to 6.3. I don't think that's actually going to change much, if anything, if I'm going to be totally honest, because 6.3 vehicles, while lower, are still going to be able to see up to 7.3 vehicles, and oftentimes they're just going to be thrown into 7.0 matches anyway, so that change isn't really going to change much at all. ISU-152. The ISU 152 is getting its battle rating adjusted from 5.7 to 5.3 again. I mean, I remember when this thing started out, it was an 8.0 vehicle. Now it's all the way down to 5.3 in realistic. It's fallen quite a ways. Oh, also, before I go on, I should mention these changes at the bottom here for these three vehicles. So the IS-2 Mod 44 and the IS-2 Mod 44 Revenge are going to get their 1956 post-war ammunition removed, which is a good change because, frankly, it's ridiculous how World War II era tanks are fighting with 1956 ammunition. So, those of you who fired nothing but that BR-471D round, well, you're going to have to get used to using your old IS-2 ammunition. So, this is a good change, I think, and these two ammo types were added so that the IS-2 could actually fight the mouse. But now that the IS-2 Mod 44 will never see the mouse, it doesn't have to worry about that anymore. So they don't need this extra powerful ammunition type, which, to be frank, wasn't all that great in the first place. So the only time it was really useful was when you were shooting at the frontal turret armor of a mouse at close range. Also, the ISU 152, its place in the tech tree is being changed. It's going to be situated right after the ISU 152 and before the ISU 122s. So that's going to be an interesting change there, because I think it makes a lot more sense because the ISU 122s came later on in the ISU 152's development, and the ISU and the SU 152 are very, very similar in their playstyles. It's just one has a slight bit more armor than the other. Not that it really changes much, but the fact that the ISU is now a 5.3, and we'll get to the SU 152, I believe that thing got lowered as well, to my knowledge. Did it? Let me just double check here. Actually, no, it doesn't. But despite that, the ISU 152 being lowered to 5.3 is a good place for it, I think. And it's the fact that they're changing the tech tree around and putting the ISU 152 behind its 122 modifications, I think makes sense. Moving on here. So, Tiger E, 5.7 battle rating change, finally. Ever since this tank was introduced at 6.0, I always thought this tank was worthless. I'm going to be honest. There was no reason to purposely up-tier yourself to get hardly any advantages, and the Japanese Tiger, the heavy tank number 6, is actually a Tiger E. So, the fact that the regular Tiger E wasn't a 5.7, and it wasn't adjusted with the Japanese patch, well, that just kind of boggled my mind. But they're finally going to change it, so that's all that matters. Panther 2. Okay, so this is going to be one of the most controversial changes, I think, in this one. Panther 2 is being up-tiered to 7.0. Does that mean a death knell for the vehicle? No. You're still going to see it at 6.7, or you're still going to see it at 7.0 games, which are very, very common at Tier 4. So you're still going to see these things, but you're going to see them a lot less. And that's because of the quantitative matchmaking that War Thunder has in place for those tiers, where the top-end vehicles in the match are limited to 4 per team. Now, what I think this also means is that it's going to force the German players to bring a lot more regular Panthers to the fight, which are more vulnerable. And either that or be forced to bring a lot more tank destroyers and more, I want to say, change up their lineups a little bit. So, which actually kind of annoys me because I'm probably going to have to redo that lineups video all over again. Oh well, it is what it is. SDKFZ 9 Flak 37, the Flak bus, is getting up-tiered from 3.7 to 4.3 in arcade and 3.7 to 4.0. To be fair, the Flak 37 was a bit overpowered up until a couple days ago when they introduced the hull break mechanic. I mean, the fact that this thing could just tank shells, and it took way more shells to kill this thing than it would a tank, was kind of ridiculous. And it has the most powerful gun at its tier, hands down. It's also the fastest firing gun of any gun. I think it's the fastest firing weapon of any gun over 75 millimeters, I believe. There are faster firing guns, but they're at a lower, but they're much lower down. So this thing did need an up tier to help balance it out. So we're gonna have to see how that works out for the vehicle. I think it'll be fine regardless, no matter what you do with it. So finally, some other controversial changes for the Germans. The Kugelblitz and the Coelian are getting significant changes. So the 6.7 to 7.0 bracket is being adjusted a lot. in terms of the German SPAAs. It was often said that the Kugelblitz was better than the Kowelian in almost every respect, other than straight up armor protection, and I'm inclined to agree. And it looks like Gaijin finally have agreed as well. So, Kugelblitz, like Arcade, is going to be 7.0 now. So it means you're going to see a lot less Kugelblitzes, but it means you're going to see a lot more Kowelians. And Kowelians, while being better armored and better protected, are going to have much better guns suitable for shooting down aircraft. And with the recent nerfs to a lot of the SPAAs, especially in their armor-piercing belts, and the much-needed nerfs to their armor-piercing belts, the Kugelblitz is not going to be anywhere near as cancerous as it used to be. We can probably stop calling this thing the Kugel Cancer at this point. Also, this is also going to get a series of changes. The Kugelblitz and the Kowelian are going to be switching places in the tree. So you're going to research the Kowelian first, and then the Kugelblitz, rather than the other way around like it has been since Ground Forces launched. So, moving on here, we've got the Jumbo and the Cobra King. Both of these, the M4A3E2 Jumbo has needed some serious battle rating changes basically ever since it was introduced. Now, is this going to be a perfect change for the Jumbo, as good as I was hoping it would be? No, I was really hoping it would be dropped down to like 4.3, but to be fair, it would probably be a little bit overpowered there. But 4.7 is the same battle rating as the Churchill Mark 7, and the Churchill Mark 7 and the M4A3E2 Jumbo have about the same armor protection, so this is definitely an improvement for the vehicle, but it's not going to be the be-all, end-all. Finally, and this is one of the changes that everybody was hoping for, and that, okay, American heavy tankers rejoice. The T-32 is finally going to be a 7.0 vehicle. We finally have a heavy tank that can fight the King Tiger one-on-one, which is glorious, and we don't need to throw $40 at the game in order to get that. So, by the way, those people who are playing who play a lot of Tier 4, once this patch goes live, expect a crapload of 7.0 games. So, if you're playing anywhere in the region of 6.0 and up, expect to be up-tiered. And if you're playing in the region of like 4.7 to 5.7, expect to be playing a lot of 5.7 games. So, if you're playing 4.7, expect to be up-tiered a lot in the coming days once they introduce this. The Cobra King is the exact same thing as the Sherman Jumbo. It just has it's just a premium version of it. That's getting a nice change. The M4A3 105 is getting lowered in arcade battles. That can only be a good thing for it because, frankly, without the heat shells, this thing is pretty bad. The VK4501P, that is basically the Panzerverfehlswagen 6P, it's the Porsche Tiger 1, but without the extra armor. That is being lowered to 5.3, meaning that the VK4501P is going to basically be a Tiger with a 5.3 battle rating. That's a very powerful battle rating adjustment for the vehicle, and it's going to make it one of the better vehicles for its battle rating. Also, Panzerverfehlswagen 6P. This is an excellent change. From 6.0 to 5.7, it means you're not going to be seeing Centurion Mark 10s anymore, which are just going to lull pen your frontal armor. Centurion Mark 3s will still wreck you, but this is going to make purchasing the Panzerverfehlswagen 6P actually a decent, worthwhile purchase. I'd still say if you have the money, buy yourself an XLA 16. However, this is actually not a bad option if you're really struggling at the 5.7 battle rating, and as long as the enemy doesn't know where to shoot you, having 200 millimeters of frontal armor and basically being a Tiger is not a bad thing at all. The M18 and the M18 Black Cat are getting nerfed a little bit. They're raising to 5.3, and to be fair, this isn't really going to change much for the vehicle. The biggest changes have come with the hull break mechanic, meaning that you can't just take 88mm armor-piercing rounds and continue fighting all the time. But this is going to help, I think, reduce the M18 spam a little bit. This battle rating change, in combination with that damage model nerf, is going to help reduce the M18 spam that is present at that tier. And it's also going to be reduced by another vehicle, which we will get to here in a second. T-3485E is being raised to 5.7 in combination with the other T-3485. That's a good change. IS-2 Revenge, like we said, with the IS-2 Mod 44, is being lowered to 6.3. And this is the vehicle I was talking about. The M36 is finally coming back to 5.7. And this is an excellent change because this follows the pattern of all of the other American tank destroyers, where they generally have guns at a lower battle rating, but they tend to punch well above their weight. Now, the M18 is kind of the exception to that because it's so fast, but the M36 trades that mobility, or trades that ridiculous mobility, for average mobility, but a 90mm gun. And the fact that this thing was a 6.3 was ridiculous. Now, back in the day, when this thing was first introduced, it was a 5.7, and it was so devastating at that time because, well, let's put it this way: a lot of the people who were at 5.7, most of the community was still in like the early tier 3s, and the people who had gotten the M36 early on were generally very, very good players. So they would just take this thing and drive around and just mow down enemies. I remember I was in a squad with two of my other friends, and between us we had 16 kills in one game when we were down tiered. So this is an excellent change for the M36. And nowadays, now that people are a little bit more experienced, the M36 is going to be powerful, but it's not going to be the most powerful at its tier. And it's definitely going to help the American 5.7 situation, because the Americans going from tier 3 into tier 4 used to be one of the weakest nations in the game, and they used to be one of the hardest nations to break into tier 4 with. But now there's all the more reason to go down the American tank destroyers line, and there's all the more reason to go down the American tech tree, at least in their ground forces department. And frankly, I always looked at the Americans not so much as a serious tech tree contender. The top 3, in my opinion, are definitely the Germans, the Russians, and the British. But the Americans weren't too far behind. And all the Americans needed was some slight adjustments to their battle rating, and then they would be far more effective, I think. Anyways, moving on. So the Jagdpanzer 4.5 dropping down to 7.3, and that kind of makes sense because, frankly, the Jagdpanzer 4.5 is essentially just an unarmored. It's kind of like a non-turreted M36 now that I think about it, just with the M48's gun. So, Raketen Jagdpanzer 2 and Raketen Jagdpanzer 2 Hot are finally being up-tiered a lot, so no more bringing Raketen Jagdpanzer 2s into 6.7 games. Yay. So, 8.0 battle rating and 8.3 battle rating, respectively. That's a good change. I think that makes sense. So, we're not going to see Raketen Jagdpanzer 2 Hots, and it also is going to further separate the differences between a 7.0 games and 8.3 games, which I think is a great thing. PT-76B is being lowered to 5.3. I think that makes sense. It's a very, very lightly armored vehicle. It also got hit with the damage model nerfs, so I think that makes a lot of sense. Firefly Scorpion and the Sherman Firefly, widely considered to be one of the worst tanks at tier 3, is getting a battle rating buff. It's being dropped down to 4.7, so it's going to be the same battle rating as your Churchill Mark 7, and if you get down-tiered, you can bring that and your Achilles, and you can have a very, very good potential day. So, this should be an excellent change to the vehicle. I never really had issues with the Firefly Scorpion. And there was no reason for me to play the regular Sherman Firefly because the Scorpion got, well, first of all, I think the Scorpion got the add-on armor packages before the regular Firefly did, and then on top of that, it's a premium, so any money I made with, or any kills and objectives completed with the Firefly Scorpion was going to give me infinitely more income than the regular Firefly, so I never really played the standard Firefly, I always played the Scorpion. Anyway, Conqueror Mark II being dropped down to 7.3, that's a good change. The Conqueror Mark II it's not a bad tank. The problem with the Conqueror Mark II is that it has a very boring playstyle. This and the M103 are part of the same gun tank concept, which I want to make a video on, but I'm waiting to get some better source material before I actually dive into that discussion. But essentially what this is supposed to mean is that the gun tanks were basically created to destroy IS-3. And the idea was that these vehicles would be sitting back at long range and picking off IS-3 as the Russians came across the Iron Curtain. And so you'd have the Centurions, which were deemed insufficient for dealing with IS-3s at proper combat ranges, and the Conqueror was supposed to be the answer to that. And the only reason why the Conqueror didn't stay in service very long was because the British got the L7 105mm gun, which proved to be vastly superior in almost every respect other than raw penetration and muzzle velocity to the Conqueror's 120mm L1A1. Which is actually kind of funny now that I think about it, because I don't think the M103 is on this list. I'm kind of puzzled as to why the Conqueror Mark II got its battle rating lowered to 7.3, but not the M103. Huh, kind of interesting. Oh well. So, A30 Avenger. I actually liked the Avenger, funnily enough. A lot of people hate it, but I actually had some good times with the Avenger. It wasn't a bad vehicle. And that's getting dropped down to 4.7, so it looks like the British are getting a nice 4.7 lineup available to them. And it looks like the Allies in general are getting a nice 4.7 lineup available. So, lots of good changes there. Crusader AA Mark 1, 4.7, again, with the 4.7 buffs to the Allies, so that's a good thing. And then we have the only 3 Japanese tanks that are actually getting a battle rating change. So we've got the STA-1 is being dropped from 6.7 to 6.3, and the STA-2 are being dropped to 7.0 to 6.3. Good idea. Anybody who's played these two vehicles will know that these two vehicles are probably some of the biggest stinkers to come out of the new patch. The idea behind them essentially is like a Japanese patent. The thing is that these things are less mobile than the Pershing, and the Pershing is notoriously bad mobility-wise. I mean, these things handle like heavy tanks, but they're not armored well enough for heavy tanks. Although I did manage to bounce like 2 or 3 shots off the front of an STA-1, I think it was, with a Super Hellcat, firing M82 rounds, so that was kind of puzzling, but regardless. And that's why you don't see very many videos on them, because across most of the War Thunder YouTubers, because they're just so bad. But this should make them a little bit more competitive to play. If it was going to be my way, I would just drop these things down to like 5.7 and be done with it. They would still see 6.7 games, so they'd still like be within that sort of battle rating bracket, but they would be far more competitive at that battle rating. 6.3 is a step in the right direction, but I don't think it's the real change that they need. And I think the reason why they're doing that right now, and not lowering them further, is because, well, the Japanese are missing a lot of potential vehicles at Tier 4. Alright, and finally, last vehicle today is going to be the Type 61. So the Type 61, while okay, and it did get a reverse speed buff, which was very, very much needed, because it was introduced with like a 2 or 3 km/h reverse speed, which was awful. And for the complete lack of armor that the Type 61 has, it needs a reverse speed in order to get out of sticky situations. It's still not great. It's only 8 km/h, but it's certainly way better than 2. And this is being dropped to 7.0. Frankly, I think it should be a 6.7, but the Type 61 is essentially a worse M47. So those are, for the most part, the changes that I want to cover to War Thunder's upcoming system, or upcoming battle ratings. Let me know what you guys think of the changes down in the comment section below. I'm very excited for this patch. This is going to be addressing... Gaijin has actually been, over the last month, addressing a lot of the big gripes that people have had with War Thunder ground forces. The biggest one out there still is the horrible grind, but that's a discussion for another video. And frankly, the game just needed rebalancing. A lot of these vehicles have not been rebalanced since they were introduced. And it was about time. The game has changed. New vehicles have been added. Tech trees have been fleshed out. And it's time to start readjusting things and tweaking them. And this is exactly what Gaijin have done with this. So good on you, Gaijin, for taking the initiative and listening to. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are listening to our feedback a lot more than you guys used to. And this does give me hope for the future. So, without further ado, this has been Many Miles Away. Keep your tracks checked, keep your bios in place, keep your ride on the tube, and I will see you guys in the next one.